All right, Mike's joining now. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's CA on CA webcast. My name is Kristen Malzone, and I am the lead community manager for the CA API Management community. Today's presenters are Satish, who is the Senior Director of IT and here at CA, and Mike, who is an advisor for cybersecurity. And they're going to present to you today on how CA uses their own API management solutions to manage our own APIs for enabling enterprise mobility and other things. So I'm going to kick it off by passing it over to Satish in just a minute. Today's webcast is being recorded, so we will post the recording and the slides from today's webcast to the CA API Management community later today. I'll also follow up via email with everyone who attended today's webcast with the links to that community, the video, and the slides. We will open the end of the webcast up today for live Q&A. So if you have a question, you can either ask it in the Q&A window in WebEx, or at the end of the call, you can unmute your line by pressing #6 or *6 and ask a question over the phone line. So let's get started. I'm going to pass it over to Satish now. Thank you for presenting today, Satish. We're excited to learn more about how CA uses their own API management solutions.
Thank you, Christine. So good morning, good evening, friends. So the topic for today's webcast is how CA IT is powering digital transformation using CA's API management solution. My name is Satish, and so this slide briefly talks about our ecosystem from an IT standpoint, which is pretty much similar to any other big enterprise. So we have about 14,000 users. We operate 24/7 global operations. We have 6 core IT locations. We manage about 100,000 devices. We have our application footprint both on the cloud as well as on-premise. So if you're looking at some of the cloud services that we interact with, we have Salesforce for CRM, we have Office 365, we have SumTotal, we have SAP, which is more on-premise. We have a lot of custom application, which is all hosted both in the cloud, be it in Amazon or be it in Azure, also on-premise. So from a standard standpoint, from a production support standpoint, we are IT compliant. We follow the change management process. We are transitioning more from a waterfall process to more of an agile methodology from a project execution standpoint. From an architecture standpoint, I think we strictly follow TOGAF. We have a strategy which is more cloud-first strategy, so any new development that they're looking to develop, we probably look at cloud as an option. So at a high level, this is more of an IT bird's eye view. Let me go on to the next slide. So in today's webcast, we'll be focusing on 2 use cases. The use case that I would be talking about is more of an external facing use case, which is how did we use API management more for building a mobile case management application for our customers. And then Mike is going to be talking about an internal use case. So when we started this initiative, I think the key business drivers were, from a business standpoint, was to provide a seamless omni-channel experience to our CA customers. So initially, we just had the portal, which was more of a web experience, and the need was to provide an omni-channel support experience. Since the experience has to be based on the devices that the users would be using. We would want them to be having an optimal user experience because users could be coming in from multiple devices, multiple versions. So we wanted to really have a seamless user experience for our customers. The key part of this initiative was to really set up the platform using the API management, which we can really use for innovation, because once we have the foundation which is built, and mobile case management was more of a first pilot that we want to really do, but then once we had the foundation, we want to really use the platform to basically bring in new accelerated delivery of support services. The key thing was to really reduce the risk of exposure. So once we would be writing the APIs, we would want them to be protected so that there is reduction of risk with respect to exposures. The key challenges that we had from an IT standpoint is to provide end-to-end security, because we definitely needed the users who are coming in on the mobile, we need to have a mutual SSL when they establish communication to the APIs. Since we had the data which is all scattered across multiple data sources, we have recently migrated from the legacy systems, which is where the cases were residing. We had recently migrated to Service Cloud on Salesforce, and then we had a lot of other systems that we were interacting on-premise. So we wanted, the critical challenge was to really see how is it that we can access the data from multiple sources and provide a seamless access to the mobile applications. The other challenge was more from an application development standpoint. We wanted to make sure developers follow secure coding practices, where with respect to the threat protections, we are covering the threat protections with respect to either cross-site scripting or the SQL injections and stuff like that. So when we talk about the omni-channel support experience, traditionally, I think from a support standpoint, we just had the support portal where the customers were really coming in to have the self-service functionalities. As part of the omni-channel support experience, with the introduction of an API, it really opened the doors for us to really bring in new avenues. So as I said before, mobile case management was just one of the avenues, but then with the introduction of APIs, what it really opened up is discussions that we are currently having, where we want to really see how is it that we can create a case from a community or create a case from a chat. And probably tomorrow there could also be an opportunity for probably creating a case from a tweet. So the big shift here is traditionally from a web experience to an omni-channel experience with the introduction of APIs. How is it that we can address the new demands which are coming in from business to really drive some of the digital transformations which is required for our business? How the CA's API management solution really enables our digital success. So there are 3 to 4 important facets here. So the key is, the first one is really how is it that we can integrate with everything, right? So as I said before, we have a lot of our information or data which is all residing on-premise in multiple repositories. We want to really see how is it that we can extend the data which is there in the legacy systems, but then meet the demands and probably provide offerings which is more modern, which can be consumed on the mobile devices. So this was one of the enablers which, from an API management perspective, which really helped us achieve this. And the components from an API management solution which really helped us is the CA API Gateway, the CA Mobile API Gateway. From a protection of the apps and the APIs perspective, I think the key thing is how is it that we are going to be protecting the APIs which we are exposing so that it is prevented from all the attacks, and also the threat protections, which we are kind of abstracting it from a developer standpoint, and then how is it that we can have all of them more written in the form of policies, which can be easily governed and controlled. So all that capabilities from the API management solution really helped us build some of these policies on the API gateway so that we can basically avoid the developers from doing all that. From a developer standpoint, I think the ramp up time was really pretty quick because the API, the SDK which was provided from the MAG really helped the developers to really quickly build the app using the SDK. So from a technology standpoint, the application, the mobile application could be developed using multiple technologies. We choose the hybrid route to build the application. We used Cordova as a platform to build the hybrid applications. So if you really look at the slide, the API gateway is where all the APIs are published, which gets published onto the portal, and then the application developers, the mobile application developers would be consuming the APIs, and they would be installing the apps on the stores, which at runtime would be connecting to the API gateway to basically bring in the data from the enterprise stores or from the cloud. So from an application architecture standpoint, I think I would want to walk you through some of the use cases from an architecture standpoint. So this is the use case where the customer would be registering the first time and then probably doing the authentication. So the key here is we basically had existing users who probably are using the portal on the web, and then we would want to really preserve the credentials. We didn't want to give them new IDs, so it's basically the users coming in on the mobile pretty much reusing the credentials and the user IDs that they had. So we were integrating with our existing IAM solution, which we have, which is CA SiteMinder. And the key thing here is how is it that we used the client-side libraries provided by the SDK, both on the iOS and the Android, to integrate with the API gateway so that we can negotiate the authorization using OAuth. So this really enabled us to provide a frictionless user experience, and it really ensured that there is mutual SSL happening when the application basically communicates with the server side. So this is the use case where once the user logs in and then the user is performing transactions, be it creating a case or probably looking at a case detail. So as I said before, all the information pertaining to a case are residing in Service Cloud in Salesforce, and then there's a lot of other data which is residing in our enterprise data store, which is fronted by an SOA ESB. So the mobile app, when it really performs, the user performs these transactions from the mobile app, it's all proxied through the gateway, which interfaces with either the cloud services in Service Cloud or through the Mule ESB to the enterprise stores. So we also had integration with the mobile app analytics. So this was more to capture the usage, user activities and the usage analytics. We wanted to really understand insight on the activities which are happening from an application standpoint, how the users are really using the app. So this is really helping us to understand the user activities, and it also helps us troubleshoot the problems. If there are app crashes, it really helps us identify the app crashes, debug the app crashes. I would probably give now to Mike.
Thanks, Satish. Good job. It's a great use case for API management on the external side. I'm going to give a use case that we're using the API gateway on the internal side. So my name is Michael Mendelson. Nice to meet everybody. I'm an advisor on the cybersecurity team. I'm responsible for securing internal CA. So this is for our internal employees. We leverage all of our security products pretty much internally. We leverage single sign-on, we leverage identity manager, and kind of in the legacy world, these things work great on the desktop. As we moved into mobile, and lots of folks in the mobile space, we saw a need to kind of enable this mobile single sign-on, for users with iPads, iPhones, Android. So what we built is a portal, and the portal displays a workspace. Kind of internally, we call this a next-generation workspace. But basically, it's a workspace that shows users what applications they have access to, and then the users are able to then click on these applications, and sign-on is happening in the background. They don't need to sign on again for each application, both in mobile and in desktop. So users would essentially sign in one time on the mobile device. That sign-on is to the gateway, the API gateway, and then the API gateway is then handling the authentications and everything thereon, and I'll show you the architecture. In addition, since we have this mobile device that's enabling this access and the authorization to the applications, it also gives us a chance to kind of present to users a few other API workflows. For example, users can now kick off workflow to reset their passwords or unlock their account and things like that. And we can leverage the API gateway so that we don't need to expose our identity manager externally on the internet. We can keep it protected behind our firewalls, and folks can still access this functionality through the API gateway. So here's a high-level architecture showing the mobile app connecting through into the DMZ. So our API gateway does sit on the DMZ. And then you see behind it internal applications. These are on-premises applications. Identity manager, again, as I mentioned, is on-premise. It's not exposed. And the API gateway can connect through to these items. It also connects laterally to our single sign-on so that it can do or take advantage of SAML partnerships with applications. And it can also connect to cloud apps. So a great use case for cloud applications, we federate all of our identities to these cloud apps, so we're not storing, syncing user stores or connecting to our Active Directory and things like that to our cloud applications. Everything's using federated access. And through that federated access partnership, we can leverage the API gateway to kind of broker that authentication. So the mobile app in this case is doing an OAuth registration to that gateway. The identity is then essentially federated to the API gateway, and then the API gateway federates the access to those applications.
Mike, we have a question in the Q&A panel.
Sure.
Are there any specific advantages why the mobile case app would go via API gateway instead of directly connecting to Service Cloud?
Sure, I think that's a question more for Satish, so go ahead, Satish.
So can you repeat the question, sorry?
Are there any specific advantages why the mobile case app would go via API gateway instead of directly connecting to Service Cloud?
So the reason being the information is just not coming from Service Cloud because there is a lot of orchestration which has to happen with other data sources which are sitting on-premise. So putting an API gateway on front helps us achieve all that orchestration before we really give the data back to the mobile case application.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Trying to think if that question's also relative to, so in our case, right, the API gateway is doing a lot of logic flow. So we really need that gateway. We can't connect directly to SiteMinder today. Maybe that would change in the future from the mobile device to handle that. But really the API gateway is handling the logic for each app, doing that authentication, and then just doing a handoff back to the mobile app with the necessary tokens and session stores. So what we've built also is a modular. It's very modular, this architecture. Our first use case was really that single sign-on, mobile access to the applications. But then we started doing things like, well, why can't we do personalization? So in other words, you see a little window in the middle. That's kind of what the application looks like, and I plan to do a demo at the end. But all of those little circles that you see represent enterprise applications. Users will want to change the ordering of these things. They want to personalize it. They also only want to see things that they have access to. So what we're doing is not only we providing authentication, but we're also doing an authorization check. So only the applications that a user can access through that authorization check will the application actually do the authentication. So there's no clicking on an application and getting access denied or some other error message because they don't have access to the application or the necessary permissions. They'll only see the things they have access to, and they can personalize it. So it's doing user entitlements, personalization, and that's its own separate module. We're also doing seamless VPN. So users with the application, if they want to access something that's internal, we can stand up a VPN connection through the mobile device by using native calls to the OS. We also offer, as I mentioned, through Identity Manager, what we call easy password. So that's your workflows of allowing users to reset their password, unlock their accounts, which, by the way, are the #1 and #2 tickets that any service desk gets for any company. I don't care where you are. Users are locking their accounts. Users are forgetting their passwords. And this kind of provides, that self-service workflow within the app. And I'll also show you where that is. We're also leveraging on the desktop our advanced auth application, which gives the users OTP. So we're doing OTP authentication into this OneAccess workspace. And then from there, they just click and they get access to their applications. And with that, we're also leveraging the risk-based authentication. And then analytics is interesting here. Because we have this workspace with all these tiles to enterprise applications, we get such a rich amount of analytics directly through OneAccess. And we'll talk more about that. But, analytics that you would only get if you went to each application individually, what applications are being used and things like that. I'll go more into that on a later slide. And we're also leveraging the biometrics feature of mobile devices. So we're able to unlock session tokens and things like that using the biometrics to create an even better user experience. So we like to look at this application as not only providing security features for our end users, but we're also really enabling the business here from a mobile perspective, from the simplicity of single sign-on, as well as from a security, as well as giving that security enablement. So this is what the application would look like. It's built responsive. It's built native. So the mobile apps are native. And on the web apps on the desktop, it's leveraging the same back-end databases, the same back-end data to render this workspace. So users get the same look and feel. They get the same experience, and it'll whatever the form factor is, whether it's a phone or an iPad or an Android, a big screen or a little screen on the laptops, Mac, Windows, doesn't matter. They get the same look and feel, and we're able to actually break up how users personalize this. So the user, it's a setting, but we can say on the mobile device, I want one ordering of applications, and on the desktop, I want a different ordering of applications because maybe on the desktop I'm always using application XYZ, and on the mobile application I'm using ABC. So they're able to kind of create that customization based on the device type as well. So here's a high-end architecture. You kind of see a lot of the things at play. Obviously, I highlighted the API gateway because that's what brings us here today. But the API gateway is really the center focus here to a number of other technologies. I mentioned single sign-on. The API gateway is doing its authentication through single sign-on. We're also using the same partnerships that single sign-on has with the back-end applications, kind of heading left here on the slide. We're leveraging the single sign-on secure proxy service for the workspace. So the workspace is essentially running on a Tomcat server, and all that authentication is happening using our SBS service. We're using a personalization service, which is built in Java, that manages that database of where users have the different icons. And then we also have an access policy service that's leveraging through the API gateway to do these authorization checks. So in other words, in order to onboard an application into this workspace, we essentially create two API policies. One that's going to conduct the authentication, and that's leveraging that SAML partnership in most cases, but it could be any other number of authentication method. It could be an NTLM, it could be SAML, it could be OAuth, and so on. We also create a second API service that's doing the authorization check, and how that's doing it is either by querying a database to see if that user exists in the database, querying an AD group, see if they have a group membership, or even just querying another API service to see, if it's a true or false, if they have access. And again, any number of ways that can be done because the API gateway kind of gives you that flexibility and that logic to create an API service to do these things. We're then also, in our architecture, caching that data. And we cache that data because there is such a number of calls. We don't want it to be to that, hitting to that back end consistently. So we cache the data and then expire that data every 24 hours. And here's our mobile app architecture. So we went native, but our native is really kind of a web browser container. So we've almost built like an enterprise web browser using the mobile application gateway, the MAG component that comes with the gateway, and that gives you features built in, no coding needed to do things like that OAuth registration and the registration of the device and securing all that stuff with the API gateway. That's all built in. How we do it is essentially the enterprise browser, or in this case we'll call it the OneAccess app. The OneAccess app makes calls to the API gateway requesting a service. That service is unique to the different application tiles. So in this example, let's say Salesforce. We also have an example SAP. It doesn't matter what the app is. You would click on that service tile. The tile would then set up all the necessary authentication tokens, sessions to that application, return it back to the end user, and then redirect the end user directly to that application. So we're not proxying the application. Really what we're doing is we're standing up authentication and then handing it back off to this enterprise browser. On the desktop, it's a little different. On the desktop, it's going directly to the application and standing up the authentication. There's no need for that container MAG component on the desktop. And so this is how the easy password feature looks. And this is really another great use for, I wanted to point this out because from an API perspective, this is kind of what it's all about, right? We have a service that's behind our firewall. We don't want to put it out on the edge. We don't want users, on the internet to be fully interacting with our identity management solution. However, there's a number of workflows. There's a number of APIs, very granular things that we want users to be able to access, right? So we use OneAccess as the example. Well, really, this could be another, native app that just does this function, right? You could create some type of employee identity application. We baked it into this OneAccess because it kind of also fits the branding of OneAccess. Get access to your accounts, your password resets, your password unlocks. Or if I forgot my password is another workflow. But we're able to present these things in a mobile app, and users can access it internally, externally, anywhere in the world. And it happens before you actually log in, which is common sense, but at this point when you're at the login screen of OneAccess is when you're presented with these workflows. And it's a very familiar workflow that users are used to. We can kind of control the UI, so it's not a big clunky UI with different options. It's very clean. In this case, what are your security entropy questions, kind of similar to how banks or things like that do it, where they answer these security questions. And then if you validate them correctly, or if you get best 3 out of 5 and things like that, we can control this workflow using the UI of the mobile app, but making all the API calls through the API gateway. And this is the workflow for password reset. Again, very familiar. The user puts in their old password, their new password. We're able to even follow through with the same policy settings. So our backend has a particular policy, like most companies, on the rigor behind the password and the complexity, and we're able to use those same policies through the API gateway. And because it's APIs, right, it doesn't have to be just on that mobile app. So we also enable it through the browser. So we've put on the desktop version of the application, we've put a tile there that users can click on and do the exact same workflow from anywhere in the world using their browser. So we mentioned analytics. These are some of the questions that the analytics of a tool like OneAccess would give you, right? So you would be able to see what apps do users have access to. So yes, it's doing those entitlement checks, but this is a really simple place to go. It's one place to go. You can see what people have access to because we're caching that authorization data. You can see what apps people are using. We also have a tool called Mobile Application Analytics, which is the next slide, but it also is seeing where users are using it, when users are using it, and you can see hotspots. You know, maybe users in the Northeast are using this type of a thing, and in the Southwest they're doing this other type of a thing. You can see what the user's experience is like, much like Satish mentioned around, you know, if there's any application crashes and things like that, how long things take to load. You can see how far-reaching your applications are, where people are using them again, and also how can you help, really that's the point of these things, is how can I help get more value to my end users. And today, these things are not easy to get in one, in one pane of glass. It's almost like a big data problem, right? How do we get all this data in one spot? And this is kind of what the mobile application analytics dashboard looks like. And again, you can see all these things like your hotspots, where users are using it, how many requests they're making, what's the average time for things to load, and all kinds of rich data like that. And that bakes right into our mobile application, both on Android and on iOS. I'm not going to read through this slide, but essentially these are all the different versioning products that we're running internally. In most cases, we're running the latest and greatest. In some cases, we might be one rev behind, but we're pretty much very, very similar representative of how any of our customers would look. And I will try to do a live demo real quickly here. I don't know if I'm going over or I think I have enough time.
We're good on time. You can do a live demo for like another 8 to 10 minutes, and then we'll open it up for live Q&A.
Sure, thanks, Kristen. Shouldn't take that long. My demo will be the mobile app on an iPad. I'll show a few things. There we go. Just going to ask Kristen real quick, do you see my desktop?
Yes, I do.
All right, terrific. Okay, so this is my iPad. Here's the OneAccess native application. It's using the biometrics as I stated. I'm just going to hit cancel for a second because I want to show you guys on the bottom. You'll see unlock account, forgot password, reset password. These are those features I was telling you about where I could do these IDM services. So it's before I log in. I can then use my Touch ID, which is also great for when you're doing a demo because nobody has to see me typing in my password. Also great in a coffee shop so that nobody can shoulder surf and see me entering my password. And also great for the end user because it's a really good, easy experience just to unlock using your fingerprint. Now, you'll see I'm presented with this workspace. The top is my identity, and then I see all the applications to which I have access to. Below it is a thing called widgets. These are little windows of data that we could pull using the API gateway, or we can just create these little snippets of you'll see there's a YouTube, there's our Twitter feed, things coming from our marketing on ca.com. And we're able to pull out this slider on the side here, and we have things like restoring our session, So you can restore the session should you exit the app, or even if you want to switch to a different device. But we're able to reorder things. So if I wanted Twitter to be #1, or if I wanted to put, you know, Salesforce up higher, because I use that app all the time, we're able to rearrange things on the application, and they show up. So this is my personalized workspace. If I want to access CA Agile Central, I can click that, and you see I go right in. There's no need for me to put in my password again. It's my identity, and I'm on my iPad. Previously, that experience would be, you know, within the browser, the Safari browser or whatever browser you're using, and you would be prompted for your credentials. I could tap on SAP Fiori, which is a tool that mobilizes SAP, and I can see what shopping carts and things like that I need to approve. Rally is a great example because that's another CA product. And I can tap on any of these things and pull up that application.
We have a question. Is OneAccess another product?
So OneAccess today is a use case of API management in several CA products. It is in discussion to become a little bit more rich on the product side, but today that is not yet anything that's out right now. It's strictly a use case of the API Gateway product. When you purchase the API Gateway and the MAG components, you do get examples of this application. So there's some kind of vanilla bare bones code that could be built upon, and certainly CA Services is more than happy to also help build this.
All right, thanks, Mike. I don't see any other questions right now. Did you want to demo anything else, or do you want to open it up for live Q&A?
Sure, yeah, we can open it up to live Q&A. Thanks for everybody's time.
Okay, great. All right, so we have another question. Does Touch ID work out of the box?
So again, I mean, it kind of goes in line with the previous question around it being a product. So that example code has all these different things. Enabling Touch ID is not very difficult once you have that code base. I'll leave it at that. It's not something that's straight in that demo or in that vanilla, bare bones enterprise browser example that comes with the MAG product. But again, it's not a very difficult thing to turn on. Our services team our services team basically came and sat with us that built this internally. They know exactly our code, they have our code, and are, fully capable of doing things like turning that on.
Okay, another question. Does the developer portal come with the CA API Gateway RHEL to deploy on AWS?
I think that's a good question for the CA API product folks, but I can answer that. So yes, it comes in several ways. You can purchase it to install on Red Hat. You can purchase it as through the AWS Marketplace, which is just a simple click-through, BYOL, bring your own license model. Really simple to deploy, and that is how we've deployed it internally. We went to the API Marketplace. We deployed the API Gateway. We popped in our license, and we were up and running.
Okay, great. Thank you. No other questions in the Q&A panel right now. If anyone would like to ask a question over the phone line, you can unmute your phone by pressing #6 or *6, or you can press the little phone with a question mark icon to raise your hand, and then I can unmute your audio for you. So if you have a question right now, please unmute your line at this time, or you can ask it in the Q&A panel. I'm going to also right now start a poll. We'd like your feedback about today's webcast, so I'm going to open that poll right now. Please rate today's CA Webcast so that we know what you think of the content that was presented today, and it will help us develop more webcasts like this in the future. All right, I don't see any other questions in the Q&A window or the chat at this time. Like I said, you can unmute your line and ask a question over the phone if you'd like by pressing #6 or *6. And again, we'll post the recording from today's webcast in the CA API Management community later today. I'll put a link to that community in the chat window. Okay, if there's no other questions at this time, I would like to thank Satish and Michael for their presentation and live demo today. This was very informative. I will be posting the recording, and I'm sure we'll get some questions in the community on the recording and slides once those are posted as well, since this appears to be a pretty hot topic in the API management space. So thank you again, guys. I look forward to working with you again and doing more webcasts with you in the future. This was great.
Thanks, Kristen.
Thank you. Okay. Bye.
Thank you.
Everyone have a great week.
Thanks, Satish. Thanks, Mike.
Bye. Thanks, Devin.
Bye.
Bye-bye.